Okay, so in 2019, Greta said to the Davos conference, the house is on fire. And as we look over the last 12 months, there's been a lot of fire going on. At the same time, there's been an 80% increase just generally in extreme weather events since the year 2000. In the UK, as of yesterday, it was announced that there are 175 schools that are going to have to close or be worked on because of rack concrete, which is reinforced, autoclaved, aerated concrete. Basically, it looks like an aero chocolate bar inside. But unfortunately, it's in our roofs and our walls and our floors, and it doesn't tell you if it's going to collapse, but it will collapse after 30 years. And you kind of wonder, at what point did somebody think it was a good idea to be using a building material that only lasted for 30 years? Here we are. But it's also in the Houses of Parliament, which is kind of interesting for the UK government. So this topic, which is new and green materials and techniques in hotel development, is topical. So it's great to be talking about it, and we've got a great panel. What I'm not going to do is introduce them because they're here. And I can pretend to talk about their degrees and what it is they do every day. But frankly, we might as well ask them to tell us, because that way they'll tell the right things, and I can just relax and enjoy it while we go through. So we're going to go this way round. So Ondrej, kick us off. Who are you? What do you do? And just set the scene for us, just very briefly.
Okay, good morning. My name is Ondrej Benes. I work in a slightly different industry, not in the hotel industry. I work for construction and development company Skanska. It's a global company. We have the construction stream consisting of building and civil. We've got commercial development, and we do the residential all over the world, or not all over the world, but in many countries. My main responsibility is acquisition and business development, and I also run the Department of Sustainability in Skanska Residential Development Europe, where we are heavily focused on sustainable and green solution, which we try to implement into our products.
So he's one of these guys who slipped into the team as a hospitality, but not hospitality. But actually, in terms of the subject matter for today, very relevant. So great. Next, Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil Halanen. I'm the head of sourcing and sustainability for Wyndham Hotels and Resorts EMEA. In that role, I'm responsible for all corporate and hotel level procurement, and also head up our sustainability team in the region. I've come from the aviation industry, so a relative newcomer to hotels, but I think it's next week is my 5-year anniversary at Wyndham, so enough battle scars to be able to talk to you today.
And topically, aviation is an interesting one in terms of tourism and travel. Whilst we're talking about how on earth do we have an eco-resort in the Maldives, but we're flying on a private jet from Seattle, it's always kind of defied logic to me. But anyway, aviation is playing catch-up, and there's some interesting new things happening. It's just we all want it to happen quicker. All right, Tiffany.
Hello, everyone. Really nice to meet you and to be here. Thanks so much for the intro, Ben. I'm glad I don't have to talk about my qualifications, but I will start with the fact that my name is Tiffany Kelly. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Beyond Bamboo. My background is sustainability. I've been working in it for 25 years, and responsible leadership. And our organization works in hospitality industry, providing sustainability consultancy and also sustainable procurement and sourcing. And we're also working globally to educate the hospitality sector about how to reduce waste and how to become more circular in their approach to amenities and products.
Superb. And finally, myself, I work with HKS who do designs, architecture and master planning, but I'm actually do advisory. So what is the project? Is there a market for it, and will it stack up? Some developers know what they want to do. Some of them, frankly, haven't got a clue, but they like staying in hotels, so they want one. And it's at that point I come along and say, okay, really? Why? And what should it be? So, to the subject in hand. It is one of those things that in some respects has been talked about a lot over the years, but I just wonder whether right now this may be an inflection point where we've had an extraordinary summer, a lot has happened, and maybe the time has come for us really to get serious about this. And starting with you, Tiffany, has can we at last put to bed the term greenwashing, or are we still washing our green?
I love it. Dive straight in there. So greenwashing is still a thing, unfortunately. There is a huge amount of work to be done. I was staying at 2 different hotels in Dubai and Saudi Arabia in the last month, and both of them had claimed, well, they had been awarded points for being sustainable. And when I went into their bathrooms, the amenities said on them, sustainable, eco-product, environmentally friendly, and with the expertise that my team has, when I had to look into them, they were plastic, and unfortunately they weren't sustainable at all. So they were stark examples of greenwashing. Having said that, I don't believe that there is an intention to do that. I believe that there is a genuine intention globally, specifically for hospitality, to move into a place where there's more knowledge, there's more expertise. But unfortunately, most of the providers out there who are selling sustainable amenities don't have the knowledge and expertise themselves to be able to say that they truly are. It is a very, very specialist thing. And so I think that, yes, unfortunately, but I do think great strides have been made towards it.
And we're going to, during the course of our time together, we're going to lift the lid on some of those materials and some of the operations and some of those changes. Phil, there's really sort of, if you like, at least 3 stakeholders, in fact 4 if you think about staff that we've just had the discussion. We have end users, we have the brands and the operators like Wyndham, and then we have the investors, developers / franchisees. And is it the case that all 3 of those groups are now on board with making changes? Or is it a case that at the end of the day, this has got to be driven by one of those groups in particular? And I know obviously you're biased given your role, but is it all 3 now or not yet? Because that's part of the reason why there's a lag, because you can always blame somebody else.
Yeah, it's a really good question as well. And I think all 3 are broadly pulling in the right direction now, which is good. So to Tiffany's point about intent, the intent is there. But again, to your excellent point about expertise, it might not be there. So I think that everybody is starting to pull in the right direction. From our perspective, obviously, with the world's largest franchising organization, we have a duty of care, not only in the obligations on us to report all of our various sustainability metrics, but also to provide that guidance to our franchisees who might not necessarily be big corporates in their own right. In this region, for example, we have a lot of mature franchisees who have got multiple properties with multiple different owners, but across loads of other geographies where we're heavily present, perhaps Turkey, for example, or India, where it might just be a family who happen to only have 1 or 2 properties, it's our obligation to provide the guidance and the framework for that property to operate in a way that's sustainable and efficient, environmentally and financially. So it is definitely a responsibility of us. To do the right thing.
Okay, so let's get stuck in. We're going to think about development to start with. And Ondrej, Skanska clearly involved with a lot of development. You're putting up buildings all over the place and a lot of them. Is there a new corporate commitment to that? Just lift the lid for us on, as a company doing a lot of building, what is your sustainability approach right now? And should others be following, and how can they, I suppose?
Okay, like our main motto is the profit with purpose, and through it we mean that we are heavily focused on our sustainability goals, and one of them is to reduce the carbon footprint. We set a baseline for 2020. It was like let's call it the baseline, and till 2045 we agreed, and we are trying to reduce the carbon footprint completely, like to get to the 0. So we have somehow monitored the way how to get there, and still we are adding new solutions on our way to net 0 future.
So the policy is in place, everybody's on board, everyone knows, and you're off and running. Okay, so let's talk about innovation, because that's really what we hear about. Let's talk about Formula One for a moment. So Formula One racing, right, in terms of what it's given to the automotive sector, right? So carbon fiber, apparently. Paddle shifters, if you've got those on your car, that came from Formula One. Steering wheel buttons, most of us have probably got those, even if your car is not that sophisticated. Adaptive suspension, hybrid power, turbochargers, rear view mirrors, apparently, came from Formula One. So we have, as part of the sector, an element which has been driving change for a long time. And I wonder, with regard to hospitality, whether part of the problem is that we haven't actually had someone behind us pushing us forward, because we've got a lot of problems, both with materials, but also with the way we throw up buildings. I think none of us particularly want asbestos, concrete, or plastic. We all kind of get that right now. But what are the alternatives? And if we think about a project from scratch, and Tiffany, let's start with you. If we come to a building site, and what can we do from day one to enhance the processes to make it better, greener, more sustainable, and reduce our carbon footprint?
So it has to start with mindset. You know, our area of focus is very much the things that are in the hotels. Having said that, we do work with many new builds globally and bring together the right people that aren't speaking to each other. So we bring together the development team, the brand, operations, procurement, because we can speak all of their language, and we get them to agree on what sustainability means. Because that's another thing about the intention. There's a lack of education about it. Predominantly in the past, there's been a lot of tick boxes that you have to do this, and there's lots of regulation. But if those things aren't joined up, and if they're not actually moving towards something that's got a strategic objective behind it, then it just becomes compartmentalized in terms of what people are doing, and they're doing it in isolation. And then cost becomes a thing as well. So I think that, you know, to speak to what you said at the beginning as well, who's driving hospitality industry, there are some fantastic initiatives like Sustainable Hospitality Alliance that have been created, who we some of us are part of, and they've created the pathway to net positive, which is providing guidance. But I think that ultimately the leaders in hospitality need to get together around a table with the developers and talk about how this becomes something that's a DNA that runs through absolutely everything. We have to create a lens of sustainability. And then in addition to that, encourage more education innovation. So for example, we're working with Project 17 and also Exeter University students to look at how we can innovate new materials that are going to be fit for purpose. So a really good example is people talk about eradicating plastic, but recycled plastic is actually better than virgin materials that are being taken from the earth. So again, it just keeps going back to that mindset, education, and leading everything with that sustainability lens.
And if again we look at the beginning of a building project, we've got a whole bunch of materials arriving on site. There's going to be waste associated with the packaging of the materials. We were excavating earth and things. Are there any ideas of things that we can do with those?
So one of the things that we've proposed to the giga projects that are happening in Saudi Arabia at the moment, and specifically NEOM, is that we collect the plastic waste from the construction, take it to a recycling plant, and then actually bring it into the manufacturing to create amenities. So there's already some things like that we're looking at doing, but there's so much more that can be done. But it takes money, and it also takes a lot more people than just Beyond Bamboo and the committee that we've created to do that.
Okay. And just in terms of the scale of that particular project, today, there's 60,000 people working on the construction site. At full gangbuster, they reckon there's going to be 250,000 people working on the construction site. That's one of those projects which is kind of mind-blowing, along with a lot of those giga things. And as I'm sure a bunch of you are probably working on them in some ways. But if we can become more sustainable in those things on them, then that will ultimately trickle down Formula One style, hopefully, to the rest of us. Okay, let's talk Skanska for a minute. What are you doing in terms of reuse of materials, in terms of trying to upcycle, maybe, Ondrej?
I guess the crucial thing is to find a balance between the cost and the benefits of all these potential solutions, because we got a toolbox of solutions, and we should decide if it really makes sense to implement them into the projects, yep, or to keep them in the toolbox, because it would be too expensive by the end of the day to sell the apartment to the final client, yep, because of the enormous cost. So we always think twice before we implement something. But there are some solutions which can be applied without increasing the cost. And one example is something what we called rebetong. We've got a trademark for it, and it's a recycled concrete. When we demolish the old buildings, we use the dirt, we use the stone from it. We take it to the concrete plant, and there to use it for a new concrete, which is then delivered again to the construction site and used once again. So I think it's a good example of the circular economy. And this recycled concrete is even cheaper than the regular concrete. So there are some solutions which can really fit into our strategy without increasing the total cost.
It's one of those ones that to me sounds really exciting. I have no idea that you could recycle concrete, and I'm sure there's a very nerdy video that one has to watch about understanding how that happens. But it's great that we're doing it. I wonder whether, is there an argument, and maybe this is, I'm coming to you in a minute, Phil, about costs, so hang in. Is there an argument to say, actually, we need to look backwards to look forwards, because things like stone and things like wood and should we be getting back to basics in some regards with regard to that? I mean, rack is a great case in point where we've stuffed up badly. But is there looking backwards to look forwards as an option?
You asked me.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all. There really isn't. It has to be local. So everywhere that you're looking for supply chain, you need to look at what are the most abundant resources, what can you recycle, what is easy to be able to make circular.
Yep.
I think that's the problem, is that we often just try and we come up with a solution, we go, right, everyone has to do that now, like no plastic. But that doesn't work for everybody, and it doesn't work for every culture, because also you have to be very specific about how you're recycling. And even some recycled materials, if it's not using renewable energy, the footprint of that is absolutely massive. So I think what it requires is a specific local focus and tailor-making bespoke solutions that really work for every organization.
Okay, and you mentioned that it comes down to cost, and I'm delighted to hear that recycled concrete can actually be cheaper than unrecycled concrete or normal concrete. Phil, I anticipate that part of your day-to-day is actually figuring out what do we use in terms of materials. And so you probably are lying awake every night thinking, okay, do I save the planet or do I make it cost effective and nice and cheap so that we get a nice return on investment? How do you make that judgment, and where's your pendulum swinging with regard to that decision?
I think the bags under my eyes show that I don't sleep very well, but it's a really difficult one. Obviously, there is a trade-off between costs, doing the right thing, making a project work, and I think it's a case of doing as much planning as you can before you start. The idea that you need to consider what's local, what's available, is obviously completely key in deciding your specification. And I think it's something that's not explored well enough. We have a relatively large footprint in the Middle East, and we say we need to recycle this, that, and the other, and I speak with our franchisees, now owners, in countries like Bahrain, and say, well, there is no recycling available. Okay, I've given an example that's local to the EMEA region, but I was talking to franchisees in America last week who said that we don't have commercial recycling facilities available for plastics. So if we specify in a load of stuff, then the expectation is you're going to recycle it, well, then it's not going to work. It's all going to end up in the bin anyway. So it's that idea of forward planning. The other thing I think I would talk about is, again, if you're building from scratch, you have the opportunity and the time to be able to consider what the building is going to be like in operation. And I think you should also consider that some sustainable techniques will actually pay for themselves after time. So I'm going to use one of our new brand examples of Eco Suites, which are designed to be sustainable from the outset. And from the beginning, they have things designed in that will actually save you money. Such very, very straightforward things, such as room sensors to identify whether the room is in use or not. And if it's not, shut everything down. My God, that's so basic. It's sort of 25 years old. But still, you look at inventory around this part of the world and it's not there. Really important to do that. Energy efficient lighting and fixtures, water efficiency, those kind of basic things. if your operation uses less, you're going to spend less. So that is a way that you can start to make the maths wash its face a bit.
And how do you educate because your franchise, your group of stakeholders is very diverse.
Correct.
How do you get them all on board with that? Have you got kind of like a 101, this is what you need to know, this will help you, to get them on board with it?
We do. So everything from the sort of the humble guidebook to products that are sustainable, all the way through to detailed construction manuals, design guidelines, etc. It all comes down to a matter of communicating and educating. I use that word as humbly as possible. I don't like to say that we go out and educate people because it suggests that we're the experts, which, whilst we're obviously very experienced in the field, we're always learning. It's very important to talk to franchisees and understand where they're coming from, because some will inherently be sustainability-led. They will think environmentally sustainable from the outset of the operations. Others will not. So you need to have an explanation for both sets of people. So for those who are really engaged in sustainability, you can start to talk to them more about using their enthusiasm to try and influence others, try and influence guests and all the other stakeholders. Those who don't get it, it's important to clearly explain why you're wanting to do something and explain the benefits from it. And cost is always a good benefit. So if you say,
okay,
you're going to save money on power, do the maths.
And I have to admit, Phil gave me a sneaky peek of their little handbook, and it does look great. I'm sure other brands are available, blah, 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 blah. But in terms of a 1 page per topic on a whole bunch of really like 101 topics or whatever, really helpful for somebody coming into it cold. So we talked about materials. Let's talk about construction. So the Empire State Building, this was a fact that I learned from people actually talking about stuff in Saudi Arabia. But apparently, Empire State Building, 100 floors, was built in a year. And that was a long time ago. And generally, the construction people in the room, when that was announced, confirmed that it would probably take about that time today. So compared to many sectors, the construction sector, have we actually seen an awful lot of innovation compared to many other sectors? You know, back to Formula One and automobiles, right? So modular development is an interesting one. And I know that Skanska's doing some stuff on that, and there's also the 3D printing kind of thing. Just lift the lid for us a little bit, Ondrej, on modular construction. Is this something that we're all going to be very familiar with? Obviously, you can't do it on an old chateau, but new build, modular construction and 3D printing, is this the future? Where are we going?
I'm not sure about 3D printing. We have tried the 3D printing at one of our projects a few months ago on the common terrace on the rooftop. We printed one extra room there. It was quite fast. It wasn't so expensive. And it was very good from the safety perspective, because there weren't any labor force involved. On the other hand, to do it in the bigger scale, like to 3D print the entire building, it would be a challenge for us nowadays. But the modular construction, I think there can be a future of construction. We started only 20 years ago in Sweden. We created a product which we call Bokluk. It means like a clever housing, and it's a cooperation between Skanska and IDEEA. And together we created the product where everything is done off-site in the factories, and just delivered to the construction sites, and to assemble the entire building with six homes with 6 units. It took only 1 week, because everything was done in a very safe way in the factory. Nowadays, we are trying to implement these solutions in the Central Europe. So, like, fingers crossed to us. That I hope we will succeed. But I guess it could be the way forward in construction industry. because I agree, as you said, construction industry is very conservative, and all these innovations which have been done within the last 20, 30 years, they were really like a small scale. Yeah. There are no disruptive innovations.
I think the modular construction is getting talked about a lot more. I think we're going to see an awful lot more of it. That ability to throw things up on site, reducing danger on site for construction workers, making sure that there's an efficiency about it, and making sure that the design works in a lab and then can be taken. I think it's kind of inevitable, right? Okay, let's...
Sorry, on top of that, it's a wooden construction, so it's a sustainable.
All right, let's shift forward to operations. And, you know, like many of you, I flew here and I was thinking, last time I flew to Prague, I don't know, it was probably 20 years ago or something, but the flight experience, the stirrer has changed from being plastic to bamboo. The cup has changed, yeah. I've got less leg room, yeah. And when they come to collect the rubbish, they have 2 bags, not 1. Other than that, it kind of felt pretty much like it was business as usual and there wasn't an awful lot of change going on. Ultimately, there'll be hydrogen and there'll be batteries, and hopefully one day that'll be fine. But in terms of our hotel operations, we know about reusing towels. That's been around for a long time, and the use of grey water and irrigation for our landscape. But who's moving the needle? What changes are being made? And Tiffany, why don't you kick this off for us? I want to talk about, you know, ripping up slippers and all of that good things. Tell us, what are we doing to make a difference?
So first of all, lots and lots of brands are doing what they can. You know, like you said, the hanging up towels and all that kind of stuff has been happening for a long time. Yep. I've stayed at some hotels in Europe on my hops just recently, and you can put a thing on the door to say, please don't clean my room today, I don't need to. So, you know, all of those kinds of things are happening, but there's so much more. And it goes back to what we were talking about in terms of greenwashing. So, for example, that I can remember even just a couple of years ago when everybody was talking about bamboo being the next best thing. And that's why our company is called Beyond Bamboo, by the way, because we believe that you've got to go beyond that. And so all these toothbrushes that were being made and being sent out, and all the hotels were cheering because they were bringing them in. But the bamboo toothbrushes have got nylon bristles. And so unless you've got specific recycling plant that removes them, the whole thing goes to landfill anyway. So actually a recycled plastic toothbrush is much better, but it's that lack of education and awareness. And then in addition to that, my team has been searching the globe for a sustainable slipper and has literally got samples from all over the world, everybody who's claiming to do a sustainable slipper, directly from manufacturers, from suppliers, and they've sat and they've painstakingly ripped them to pieces to see if they are truly sustainable. And every single one of them had something in it that makes it not sustainable. So again, it's not a lack of intention to do the right thing. It's just time. That's another thing as well. Procurement teams within these brands are tiny generally, and you know they don't necessarily have years of experience of sustainability. They're looking at negotiating and costs and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think it takes, at the moment, agencies like ours to come in and give that security and that lens of transparency to say, we've done the work so you don't need to. And for every one of our products and we're manufacturing our own now as well, we produce a look behind the label. And the look behind the label says exactly where the products come from, the supply chain of the product. My team does a deep dive into if it's a supplier as opposed to a manufacturer. We look at the supplier as a brand as well, who invests in them, who's their parent company. So we're really providing all of that information. And look, at the moment, there are some products that aren't sustainable, but we say this is the best that you can get right now.
Yeah. Phil, is it true that procurement teams are tiny? Question number one. And question number two is, generally, for most of us, when we go to stay in a hotel, we're looking for an experience which hopefully is one step above what we have at home. Either the bath is slightly bigger, the towels are slightly fluffier, the bed is slightly, there's probably less rubbish lying around. But is it possible to achieve some of that aspiration for decadence, even on a minor scale, and still tick the boxes and try and be sustainable? Can you do both?
Yeah, I think you can. Look, it's a trade-off, isn't it? So if you're operating a 5-star ultra-luxe experience, you don't want to go in there and have a shower that's a dribble, because it's not going to be what you've paid for. But it's about how that property and that operation deals with its water holistically, rather than just that little bit of guess. So if that water is then going, obviously it'll be grey, and then it's just going down the drain, obviously that is no good. However, if that is then used, as you alluded to irrigation, or it is somehow dealt with, then I think that's fine. I mean, we've got a good example of a hotel in Istanbul, the Wyndham Grand Istanbul event. That's a big tower block. It has a huge rainwater collection facility, and it still offers its guests a kind of hand scroller level of shower experience with good pressures, etc. But it's using that rainwater that it collects to purify that, feed it, and then feed it back in. So for me, that's a good sort of circular life cycle way of doing it with it. Going back to your earlier question about procurement teams being sort of time poor, yes, they are, because they're always involved quite late. But for me, it's a question sort of going a little bit back to the question you asked Tiffany. One of the key things that people should do is measure what it is that they're doing. It doesn't matter what change you're making. Do make sure that you measure, you set out your objectives for it, and then you measure it with data you know you can collect repeatably and reliably, because then you can actually see the impact of what that change is going to be. So if you put in, say, a water flow restrictor into a tap, measure what you're doing before you put it in so that you can baseline what it is. Then measure the change that change has had, that operational difference has had, and then report it, because then you can really reliably say, well, I'm doing something, and you can understand whether that thing that you're doing has an effect, and then you can start to talk about that effect.
Now, that makes a lot of sense for new build. I'm going to come back to you and talk castles in a minute, but whilst we're on that topic, if you're putting in, whether it's a branded residence or whatever, a residential kind of building, what kind of sensors and clever tech are you guys now layering into some of those developments at Skanska, Ondrej?
We do the smart homes for the clients, that when they buy the home, it's equipped with some clever external shading and stuff like this. There are a few things, not many, I would say. What we do is we are using the solar panels and photovoltaics panels, PV panels on the rooftop, which, according to the current legislation, we are able to get the electricity also into the homes. It used to be that we were able to use it only for the common spaces in the buildings. Nowadays, we can use it for the homes. So the users, the buyers, clients, they can reduce their electricity consumption. Okay. So it can be one of the solutions.
So, I mean, building management systems are way more sophisticated than they've ever been before. But presumably, and Phil, you've got an extraordinary portfolio, and some of them are going to be big old chateaus and schlosses and castles and things. And if you're presented with one of those, I presume that your heart probably sinks. But in terms of delivering sustainability, but are there things that you can do with regard to building management systems that aren't too intrusive, that you can kind of get away with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is the joy of the kind of the franchisee, is you're presented with a wide range of different inventory when it joins the network. And castles are one thing, but I'm thinking specifically about an estate that we have in the UK, which was hotels that were built 30 years ago. They have fixed radiators in them that are turned on and off by the guest, can be left on by the guest, etc., etc. So again, to Tiffany's point earlier, it's all about what the situation you're presented with is and how you deal with that. Using things like sensors in a room like that will just turn the power off, or even just the key card thing. It's very simple to put it in. Everybody is used to it, and it's not obtrusive, and you're not going to have to start ripping the walls off and putting a huge capital cost in to be able to have an impact on your emissions and your consumption. So there is a key for every lock in that regard. So you just need to take a view of what the inventory looks like and come up with a solution that's going to be appropriate for it. The worst thing I think you can do is start to rip all these things down. It's that circularity. So, well, this is no good. We're going to completely rip it to pieces and start again. because then you're going to start to come into problems with embedded carbon if it's got concrete. Obviously, if there's dangerous stuff, you need that out, but it's important to work with what you've got to get that asset to be as efficient as possible by tweaking it.
Organizations and certification, Tiffany. Is it worth, well, I mean, what certificates should we be striving for? Are they relevant? Are they still relevant? And what are the alliances out there? And should we be a member? What would they do for us if we were?
There's so many, and also they're jurisdictional, so it's really difficult to sit here and list them all, okay? So I think it's a very difficult mission for organizations to work out all of the regulations, and I know that there's some hefty fines coming in with some of them as well. So I think becoming a member of some of the alliances, and there's a few, the one that we're a member of is Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, and they help with all of that. They provide it all for you, depending on where your location is. So I think, you know, it's about asking for help and not being shy to do that, because there's just so much to go at. And actually the certification is becoming really important because guests are voting with their feet, stakeholders are voting with their feet, you know, the organizations that are doing better in this area are getting more recognition. One of the things that I've found really heartening about being part of the Alliance is that what has been quite traditionally a competitive industry has become less so and more what we call supportive competition, which is about sharing successes, to your point, Phil, about measuring so that they can raise the bar and then other people can be inspired and they can raise the bar. And I've sat around the table at council meetings with the Alliance where we've had the biggest brands saying, this is what we're doing, do you want to hear about it? And sharing it, which is something that I haven't encountered in this industry before. So I think it's actually pulling people together in a way where, you know, the ultimate client in all of this is the planet, right?
Yep.
And so if we can do something to really make a difference and rejuvenate, then I think everybody wants to, genuinely.
That the collaboration piece is huge, right? The fact that getting everybody together and being honest and upfront, and because it's for the greater good, right? Okay. Getting close to the end, but let's just do some sort of closing thoughts. Phil, are you optimistic about the future? One, where do you think we're headed? And if there was a closing thought on this topic about development and materials, what would it be for us?
Yeah, I am optimistic because we're roundtable talking about it, and we're getting slowly better at it. There's probably too many certifications, which is confusing not only the industry but the end consumer in the customer, which is obviously no good for the ultimate end consumer of the planet. But the conversations are happening and we're getting better. And I think the regulators are starting to listen to us more as an industry as well. So that is good. My closing thought, data. It's very boring, but I'm quite a data person. So make sure you measure what it is that you do so that you can report on it and then see whether or not what you've done has happened the way you want it, and you can then tweak it to make it better.
Okay, excellent. Data, but he's also a musician, so interesting balance. You can ask him about that later. Ondrej, closing thoughts. Are you optimistic? Is Skanska kicking the door down to start building hotels for us? That's probably a bit of an unfair question in terms of your corporate strategy. But anyway, with regard to development of materials, how you feel?
I feel very positive about the future because 10 years ago we didn't care about the sustainability at all in Skanska, frankly speaking. 10 years later, we have done a huge progress, and I believe that we are on a good track, and we will continue in this way. And in 10 years, we will be really like outperforming in this area.
Okay, good for you. And then Tiffany, bring us home. I know this is a huge passion of yours, so you get the closing comment. How are you feeling about the future? Are we making progress, and what do you think we should do next?
I'm not just optimistic, I'm excited. Having seen everything that I've seen recently, I'm really excited. There's so much to do, but I think in terms of a closing comment, in terms of a call to action, if we spent even a small amount of the time that we do on the things that we don't want in the world, and instead focus on what we do want, and talked about solutions and worked on innovations and put money behind these kinds of things, massive amount of change would happen even quicker. But yeah, I feel very, very excited about what's happening. I think with these giga projects, which the world has not seen anything like these before, if we can get in very, very early and we can get them to be the ones that are pioneering and leading the way, every single other build that happens has to follow that. And the great thing is that we're being received with open arms. So that makes me feel really optimistic. Yeah.
Superb. Well, Ondrej, Phil, Tiffany, thank you very much for your time. Please show your appreciation.